guys, Brooklyn Attic Books here. I wanted to show you guys what I read during the month of July. Now, I ended up reading 7 books this month. Yep, that is right. These are the books. And I have to say, I read some absolute bangers this month. I really did. My friend Sarah at Wicked Words actually recommended a NetGalley advanced reader copy, an ebook that she had read and she was totally stoked about and highly recommended. I do value an honest review, and so I went for it. The book is called Dead Money by Jacob Kerr. I thought it was a good book. It was I think like a Silicon Valley. I read it a couple books ago now, but it was about a Silicon Valley company and a murder mystery. I ended up guessing the murderer pretty early on in the story. I'm kind of weird like that, where I kind of have a theory going in the beginning of the book of where it might end, and so I kind of called it very early on, but it was a fun read. This month, I also read Going Postal by Terry Pratchett, and I have to say, I'm now officially a Discworld fan. This is fantastic. It's amazing comedy. The dialogue is so witty. The story is so witty. I can't wait to meet some of the other characters in the Discworld throughout the city. This is such a cool discovery for me. Discworld is like 40-something books, I think. Like, it's super intimidating, and to know that you can just jump around and start anywhere, it's kind of refreshing as a noob to the series, right? I read The Dragon Waiting by John Emford, and I have to say that I know a lot of people recommend it. A lot of people are like, wow, it's so great, it's so amazing. Except I'm not into history, and this really was a bit dry, and it was a bit all over the place. Like, I had a really hard time following this. I'm not a history buff at all, especially European history. You have to be knowledgeable on European medieval history slightly to be able to follow and understand the fictional parts, like for it to I'm not a history buff, but if you are, I highly recommend this book. But if you're like me, then it's dry. Like, I would have to reread this with research going on the side to understand the fictional parts. On top of that, it's written in a way that it's a little bit hard to follow. So this really wasn't for me, I would say that. Another book I read was an ARC that was actually sent to me back in May. I am so sorry for the late review, but better late than never, right? So this book actually releases tomorrow, August 1st. And if you have teenagers that are into cool paranormal type of stories, this is definitely for them. This reads like a really cool YA. The world building is phenomenal. The characters are very realistic. I love the characters. Louis Parada just does that. He creates these amazing worlds in his books that it's hard not to get invested with the characters and to follow the story through. And so this is really cool. But if you're looking for a more adult read, maybe this isn't for you. So I didn't realize that this was going to be a YA. He had reached out to me and sent this to me, and I'll gladly read it. And it was fantastic writing, but a little bit toned down for me. Given that I loved his other book, Out on a Limb, which I cannot wait for part 2, because apparently it's going to be a series. Believe it or not, I found Womb by Duncan Ralston at a thrift store. That's right. You don't usually find indie, self-published splatterpunk at thrift stores, but I did. This was wild. This was so wild. As I was reading it, I'm like, this isn't that crazy. Everybody said it was so crazy. This really isn't that wild. And then I keep going back to it. I keep thinking about it. So it actually is a pretty wild splatterpunk. It's not as crazy as Playground by Aaron Beauregard, I would say, but it's up there in creativity. Let's leave it at that, right? Splatterpunk is all about the creativity. A couple months ago, I went to the book signing for this book, Rouge by Mona Awad. So that was really fun to get an insider look at how she composed and the questions she answered for the book talk that she was doing. However, at that point, I wasn't too familiar with the story, but going into it with the knowledge that she had ammoed me with from the talk, I appreciated the story for what she wrote it to be. The story itself weaves very dreamlike. So if you like, I've had nightmares where I feel like I'm walking through a like drugged up state, and I don't like that feeling. So it made me feel almost very like woozy, like I'm reading somebody else's like dream. And it was very interesting to see the character discover things about, I guess, her history or her past, her family. And so if you're into that type of dark fantasy fairy tale-esque horror, then this is a really cool read. It's really about, I guess, the lady is obsessed with beauty and about staying young. But what was really funny to me about this book is that even though the main character and her mother are obsessed with their skin and their beauty and all that, they always have a cigarette hanging out of their mouth or off the tip of their fingers. Or I don't know anybody that's obsessed with skincare that much and would be like, oh, let me light up a cigarette. Like, we know how damaging cigarette smoke is in the year 2024, right? And even in this book, like, I don't know what year exactly it's supposed to be taking place in, but she's using like her cell phone to look at YouTube beauty videos. So like, it's modern day. So I just thought that was really weird and inconsistent. Even if the mother still smoked, why would the daughter be smoking too? Anyway, my last read of the month that I just finished today that I'm so excited about is Fever House by Keith Rosson. This book is fantastic. If you were a fan of The Swan Song by McCammon or The Stand by King, this is it, ladies and gentlemen. Here it is. He joins the reigns of the greats. And I will tell you why. Because when I was reading Swan Song, when I was reading The Stand, the entire time I just wanted zombies to pop up. And this is it. This is your post-apocalyptic zombie story. Yay! Aside from it having a similar type of layout, it's so very different. This is such a different book. I loved it. I love that the main character is not a child or a teenager. And I loved that it's so gritty and that it's almost like reading the damn Sopranos at times. I loved it. I can't even talk about it yet. Okay, I can. So the story itself involves multi-point of views, right? And I love that. King, McCammon, they all do this. They all like to bounce around from points of views. So at one point that I was reading this as a buddy read with Sarah from Wicked Words, I was like, who is supposed to be like the main character here? Is it this guy? Is it this guy? And I don't think that's the point of it. I think the point of it is to show you what happens at Ground Zero before Ground Zero becomes Ground Zero. And it is mind-blowing. So the story mostly takes place in Portland, Oregon, which is badass in itself. But then they also cut to New York City a lot of the times, which is so cool. And it cuts to a couple different cities. It's very interesting. And so you got mobster type guys, you have washed up rock stars, you have secret government agents and labs. You don't know who's bad, you don't know who's good. It's very intricate. We are slowly spoon-fed each character's background as the story moves along. So it's not like here's 50 pages of background story and now here's the characters. No, it's a story that starts playing out, and then you're slowly introduced to each character. And I love it. I love it. It's so well done. The writing is excellent. You do not get bogged down in the details. The story just sucks you in. I finished this in 2 days. Okay, I took a day break in between, but I had a headache. So 2 days, that's how much. And this is what, 412 pages, I believe? This is a big book. By the way, this leaves off on a cliffhanger, but guess what happens then? Book 2 is coming out, and I have the arc already. Thank you so much for the copy from Penguin Random House. It goes on sale on September 10th, and I'm so excited to dive in. So to sum it up, I had a crazy cool July. I really did 7 books in probably 7 different genres. My God. So my favorite book I thought was going to be Terry Pratchett's Going Postal, but then I read this a few days ago, and I highly recommend Fever House to everybody. Go read it. It's so good. It's so gritty. I loved it. You will too.